Hi, I'm Dr. Rob Silverman, Amazon best-selling author of Inside Out Health and host of Proven Health Alternatives. Today's episode is a must-see. Dr. James Kelley, medical liaison of l-nutra. He's going to take you through the differences of fasting, intermittent fasting, time-restrictive eating, and fast mimicking diet. The takeaways will be implementable, and I have to tell you, they are without question earth-moving. Hi, everybody. Dr. Rob here, Proven Health Alternatives. I have an outstanding guest, Dr. James Kelley. Dr. Kelley, how are you?
Great. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I'm going to have a great time with you. We're going to talk about fasting. We're going to talk about what fasting is, all the different fastings. So many questions I get every day in my office and on the lecture circuit. I am happy to have you. You are the consultant medical liaison, science liaison to l-nutra.
That's correct. Yeah. The makers of the world's first and only fasting mimicking diet, Prolon.
There you go. I love it. And I use it in my office all the time with great results. So let me give everybody a little background on you. I've got your bio right here. Dr. Kelley brings both clinical and business experience to l-nutra. His background is in the development of early stage medical and biotechnology, in addition to working with and educating physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. He completed his MD at the Ohio State University and was the inaugural research fellow at the Ohio Health Research and Innovation Institute. You also have an MBA at the University of Southern California Marshall School of Business. You've worked with the USC Alfred Mann Institute for Biomedical Engineering, the Lloyd Grief Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, and the Stevens Institute of Technology. You also have a bachelor's degree in cell biology from the University of Virginia, and you completed your neuroscience master's coursework at Miami University. Before you came to l-nutra, which we're going to talk a lot about, you were the head inventor services at the Innovation Institute, a partnership with the Cleveland Clinic Innovations Group focused on developing and commercializing new and innovative healthcare solutions. Quite impressive, a lot for quite a stellar young gentleman.
Oh, it sounds impressive when you read it. It didn't seem quite so much. I did a lot of cool stuff, but certainly sounds great the way you said it. So thank you.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So here's the question. What is fasting and is it a good thing?
That's a great question. I think fasting is the main thing that drove evolution. I think it's the reason that we are here as humans even having this discussion. I think it's the two things that drove whether we survived. So one, you got to pass on your DNA. So you have to procreate in some way. But two, you have to survive between breakfast and lunch in order to do so. If you die en route from one meal to the next, you never get the chance to pass on your DNA. So for me, the mechanism that developed inside the earliest single-celled organisms that allowed us to survive when resources were scarce is the main driving force of how we got here. So for me, fasting is an incredibly beneficial thing because it's what triggers your body to go into that regeneration mode, that restorative mode that gets rid of all the waste and optimizes the body. So it's something that we've gotten away from in recent years as resources have become much more abundant, but it's something that I think we grew up with and co-evolved with our entire history since the dawn of life. So for me, I think fasting is a great thing. I can go into much more depth if you like, but I figured that's a good place to start.
So how does fasting help in longevity? I mean, we all know it's based on Dr. Longo's longevity diet. It's a great read, without question. Dr. Longo, I'll say it for you. Dr. Longo was just voted in 2018 one of the top 50 influencer in health. He's clearly a forerunner in fasting. So how does it play a role in longevity?
Yeah, and that's also a good question. Right now, so to definitively state anything, you need a very, very large published peer-reviewed clinical trial, which at this point we don't have. So in order to make a longevity claim, we can't say that. But what we do know is, well, at least for fasting mimicking diets, we can't say that. But for fasting, we can very clearly say that a couple good things happen when you fast that appear to contribute to longevity. When you're constantly in a fed state, you're constantly in a growth state. If you're giving the body abundant resources, it's always going to be able to ignore the fact that it's not operating optimally. So it's sort of like a company with tons of money coming in. It doesn't have to make the best decisions, doesn't have to necessarily, every employee doesn't have to be perfect in order for the company to survive because the balance sheet still looks really strong. But when money stops coming in, all of a sudden the company has to make some hard decisions. It has to figure out where is the waste, who is not performing optimally, and what to do about that. And a couple things can happen in the body when that happens. When you run out of food, a couple sensors turn off, and when they turn off, clean off turns on, and two processes called autophagy and apoptosis are triggered. Autophagy is cellular repair. It's where broken, damaged tissue does a self-assessment and says, am I too broken and do I need to kill myself, or do I need to repair myself using my own parts internally or the parts of my neighbors? And so the cells will go through that repair, and then if they're too broken, they'll delete themselves, and a stem cell will come in and replace them. So you now have brand new tissue sitting next to older optimized tissue over just a couple days. And if you think about what aging is just rapid growth. You have a certain number of certain cell lines, and when you turn them over as you grow, you just use them up quicker. So the faster you're growing, the more quickly you're using up all the copies you'll ever have of certain tissues. And when you reach the end, that's it for you. So rapid growth, while you may feel better, you may carry more muscle, is really all just a sprint towards the end. So there's got to be some balance between getting rid of the damage from high growth, which when you replicate a lot of DNA, you also accumulate DNA damage. So there's got to be a balance between how quickly you're growing and maintaining muscle and how well you're repairing all the damage that that's causing, and also how, if you can, slowing down the mechanisms that lead to age-related disease and decay. So fasting definitely plays a role, as does other things like nutrition and overall fitness and things like that. But fasting is certainly one of the components that you can use to intervene with how rapidly we grow in age. So in my opinion, and in all of our research from Dr. Longo primarily and several other sources, rapid growth isn't always good, and fasting can play a role in helping to improve that.
I thought the metaphor was great with the corporation. You know, you don't have to make as many mistakes and you're growing.
Yeah.
But growing isn't growing. I thought that those decisions are great because, like you said, the autophagy is like the cellular cleanup, being a more efficient machine. Killing the cell, which sounds terrible, apoptosis, but what you said, stem cell regeneration and stem cell growth. So I don't want to steal any thunder on when we asked the difference between it, but could you explain that process just a little bit for everybody and why that would be good?
About the stem cell-based regeneration process? Yeah, and so again, we need more data, and at the moment we have some pretty strong data. We definitely have strong animal model data, but we really want to rely on human data because mice are not people. But most of the evidence that we have points to a couple cool things that happen when the body regenerates itself. We do a lot with stem cell therapies in medicine these days, but for me, the thing that makes the most sense is if you think about how complex we are, there's literally billions to trillions of processes going on every day. And if we try to just stick one piece in, we may get lucky and we may get the right piece. But if we tell the body, hey, do the thing you're programmed to do, you're going to get a lot better results. So what happens with fasting is when you do the apoptosis or apoptosis, depending on how you want to say it, when apoptosis is induced, the theory right now, and most of the evidence seems to agree, is that you blow up a cell, which sounds bad, but is necessary because sometimes the cell is too damaged to be useful. That releases intracellular signaling molecules, basically triggers a cascade of things that happen. And when those signaling molecules leak out, the bloodstream carries them to the necessary places. Stem cells get released into the right spots, and they kind of migrate to the tissue that released the signal to begin with. So just basically a homing beacon. It finds where it came from and turns into that right piece of tissue. So the body is very smart. It has this mechanism built in, or at least some version of that gets you to the end result where when you delete something that you really needed, you replace it with something that's brand new that can do the same function. So what we showed in animal models with fasting mimicking diets, and then there's some good evidence in humans as well, is that you put them in a couple days of fasting, you do delete tissue, you optimize other tissue, and then bloodstream levels of mesenchymal stem progenitor cells go up by about 800% on day 5 of the fast. So what that shows is there's some signal that tells the body you need to make more, or at least release more of the thing that can repair you. Mesenchymal stem progenitor cells, or MSPCs, are mesodermal cell line, and mesoderm makes most of you. So there's a couple different stem cells. I know we're getting a little far down the rabbit hole, but basically this is targeted stem cell regeneration done by your body on itself. At least as far as we can tell, all the evidence points to that being what's happening.
So that's on a prolonged fast, and that's what you're talking on a cellular level.
Yep.
So I'll reel you in. I'll ask an easy one.
Sorry, thanks.
No, it's all good. You did a great. It's a great job. It's fascinating. I'm riveted here, and I know everybody listening will also, because fasting is the topic. However, people use certain terms in the parlance and it seems to be incorrect. So, intermittent fasting, if you could define, time restrictive eating, time restrictive feeding. water fast, and of course,
Yeah.
fast mimicking, prolonged fasting, etc.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give you the brief version of what I know. And again, there's a lot, different sources will tell you different things, but basically there's a couple different types of fasting. You mentioned the first and most common that people usually refer to as intermittent fasting, but it's technically time restricted eating, is like a 12 or a 16-hour fast. So that's TRE, time restricted eating, or in animals, time restricted feeding. And it's really the concept of just, you have about 12 hours of glucose from your last meal. And if you fast for 12 hours, you'll use up that glucose and it'll force the body to switch into an alternate energy state, even just for a second. And that's actually, it seems to be a really good thing. It's sort of like working out. You want to change your workout up every now and then to kind of confuse your body, and that gets better results. Same thing happens with energy. If you switch how the body's using energy, you get some really good metabolic results on a local level. So time restricted eating is shown to have some benefits, possibly improving cholesterol, losing a little bit of weight, just because you're condensing how long you're eating. There are some downsides if you continue beyond 12 hours, like there's some evidence that you can have increased cardiovascular challenges, or you can potentially get gallbladder problems because you aren't moving the gallbladder. And if you do a 16 or an 18-hour fast, there is some increased risk of gallbladder issues and gallstones. Another more common type of fasting is intermittent fasting, which to me is the 5-2 diet or something like that, where you have basically 5 days of the week you're eating normally, and 2 days you're fasting, or you're eating less than 200 or 300 calories. And whether you eat those 2 days in a row, or you split them up and you do 3 days of normal, 1 day of fasting, 2 days of normal, 1 day of fasting, that's sort of more intermittent fasting. And then you go into prolonged fasting, which is basically anything beyond 48 hours of fasting. Most of the stuff we look at is about 5 days. And the reason we look at 5 days, and believe me, I wish you could get the results in less time, but the reason is because it takes about 48 hours to activate in humans that autophagy and apoptosis or apoptosis. Then it takes about another 48 hours to get the cleanup. And then the 5th day is really when you see stem cell-based regeneration. And water-only fasting, where you're not eating any food, but you're consuming water, is one way to get there. It's incredibly challenging. About 90% of people from the studies that I've seen drop out by day 2 of a water-only fast. Whereas what Dr. Longo pioneered, and what I'm here to do, is teach about fasting mimicking diets. And what these are it turns out that the body recognizes food through 3 key pathways: IGF-1, mTOR, and PKA. And I'm happy to go into depth on those if you like, but they get a little technical pretty quickly. But the short version is, these are the stages, these are the guards at the gate. When food comes in, the guards recognize that food is present. And Dr. Longo figured out that these are not like, your body's not an on-off switch. It's more like a roller coaster. You've got to get over the top of that hill to start the ride. So he just figured out how high the hill was. How much protein do I give you before the ride starts, before you trigger IGF-1? How much carbs and sugar can I give you before you trigger mTOR? And then protein kinase A, the same thing. And when he figured out how much each one of those levels was and added them together, he turns out you can give somebody a very, very particular ratio of 10% protein, 50% healthy fat, and 35% carbs, 5% sugar, with a lot of fiber in there. And you can, at a certain caloric amount of about 800 calories a day, and you can trick the body into staying in a fasting state at a cellular level. So I'm still giving you food, but I'm giving it to you below the level that those guards sound the alarm, and that keeps the cells in that autophagy and apoptosis state. So you get all the cleanup while still getting 3 meals a day, plus snacks, plus dessert, plus drinks. We try to make it easy, and there's a couple benefits to that. The main difference between water-only fasting and fasting mimicking diet over 5 days is that with water-only fasting, there's a period where your body's going to consume a lot of your muscle. I know you and I have talked about this in the past. So if I could just go ahead and extend the answer here, where I talk a little bit about that.
My guest.
So with water-only fasting, after 12 hours, you run out of the sugar from your last meal. Glucagon in your bloodstream goes up. That tries to recruit more blood sugar, and it gets it from a couple places. You're not eating anything, so it has to find sugar somewhere. And ketosis doesn't provide blood sugar, it provides energy, but it'll only provide about half the energy you need, and it doesn't really kick in until about 48 to 72 hours into a fast. And it starts a little earlier, but it doesn't reach peak until then. But so for about 36 hours after you run out of glucose and you still need energy, your body's going to be consuming energy from itself. And it gets it from glycogen, amino acids, and glycerin. And the glycogen and amino acids are found primarily in the liver and muscle. So your body's going to start eating its own muscle about 12 hours into a fast. And then it'll keep doing that for the next 36 hours. So in a water-only fast, you're going to lose a significant amount of muscle mass. Different studies say between 5 and 15% of your lean body mass. And with fasting mimicking diets, we're giving you some of the things that the body would be looking for otherwise, but we're not turning off that fasting mechanism. So we're giving you glycerin to use instead of muscle for energy. We're giving you some sugar and carbs. So Prolon's main benefit over water-only fasting is that we preserve lean body mass. The other main benefit is that it's actually easier to do. About 95 to 100% of people, depending on where you're looking, are able to complete the 5-day fasting mimicking diet, while 10 or 15% can do a water fast or less. So it's much easier. So that's basically what I know about fasting. There are other extreme versions you can do under medical supervision. 30-day water fasting has been done in certain areas. But again, it's very important. The body needs electrolytes. It needs certain nutrients and metabolites. So we try to take the hardship out of fasting. We try to make it easy and foolproof. It's still challenging, and our diet's not for everybody, but it's certainly something that we're trying to bring to the masses in a doable fashion.
I thought that was a great explanation, because so many of my patients do it, and we try and explain what they're doing. So essentially, there's a lot of advantages to time-restrictive eating. But the prolonged or fast mimicking diet's real advantages, it's a few more days. You don't lose lean tissue.
Body mass, yeah. You don't lose lean body mass. You don't lose your lean body mass.
Hold on, because we talked about the glycerin. You're still eating. So would it be fair to say, so everybody watching, that your stomach's full enough, but you're fooling your brain into fasting?
Yeah. That's what we always say. The stomach sees food, the cells see fasting. So yeah.
And that's why it's a fast mimicking diet, if you will. Now, to speak to ketosis, because a lot of people like ketosis, do you feel that the diet allows us to go into ketosis? Because there's a lot of benefits.
So yeah, that's a great question. And we think ketosis is a great thing too. It's sort of a side benefit, and it does occur on the diet. You will reach, for the vast majority of people, full metabolic functional ketosis, which is, I think, defined as like 1.5 millimoles per deciliter of ketone bodies, or some variation of that if I messed up the metric. But
it's about, they say 1.5 to 3. You got it.
Yeah. So but you'll stay in kind of a mild to moderate full ketosis. You'll get to about 1.5. Some people get a little higher. Some of the days they're down around 0.8, but they're functionally in ketosis. We're just giving them enough stuff that they don't need to produce more ketone bodies. But if you were to just stop our diet and do a ketogenic diet, there would be no conversion. You'd just be in ketosis. So you're in ketosis. And that's why we have some of the same challenges as ketosis on day 2 and 3, such as pretty severe headache in a small portion of people, or some fogginess until everything kind of balances out. But you will be in ketosis. It's not really a ketogenic diet, but it does meet all the standards of a medical ketogenic diet. So again, if you wish to continue ketosis afterwards, you absolutely can. That's something that you won't have to go through conversion. It helps get you into ketosis in a kind of a more smooth way.
So 2 questions based on that. So the big overriding question is, everybody loves a ketogenic diet and a plant-based diet. So essentially, it's a plant-based diet that Dr. Longo talks about in FMD, yet we're able to get some of the benefits of ketosis because of caloric restriction in the macronutrient composition, which is, for me, quite exciting, because I do like the ketogenic diet. There's a lot of benefits to that. So I want people to understand you're actually getting into ketosis on a plant-based diet.
Yeah. And again, so the main benefits of ketosis tend to be burning more visceral fat for fuel and providing beta-hydroxybutyrate to the neural tissue and things like that. And you will do that on this diet. You lose about the same amount of weight as you would on a water fast or an extremely low-calorie ketogenic diet. It essentially is a heavily modified ketogenic diet. But we don't really focus on the ketosis. We focus much more on the cellular cleanup. So people who are measuring their ketone bodies by urine or blood may not notice as extreme ketosis as they would like for the 5 days. We think that's okay. And if they want to continue afterwards, then again, I think ketosis is great. I do caution everybody. I'm kind of a moderation guy. I want them to do a couple weeks of it. I don't want them to do years, or, just because it tends to, some of the results we've seen can be pretty funky for their metabolism, but everybody's different. So everybody needs their own evaluation. And that's where people like you come in. We really want stuff tailor-made to people, but you will get ketosis from this diet. It may not be as strong as some people are looking for, but other people do reach massive amounts of ketosis on the diet. Some people get 5 to 8, depending on their body size, their metabolism, all of that stuff factors in too. So I know I'm giving you a little bit of a roundabout, but
No, that's great. And you're right. You say beta hydroxybutyrate is great because it increases BDNF. It's great for brain fuel. It uncouples the cell membrane, L-glutathione. But we want to stay on the cellular thing. You did mention headache. If someone has a headache, they're doing it. Any suggestions? Which,
so that's more,
not to interrupt you, very few
Go
of
ahead.
my patients, if any, have really complained about the headache. But we know the headache, the swoosh, because the carbs are low and the calories are low. What would you suggest?
And that's a great good segue too. Yeah, I get it very badly on the diet. But part of that is because I don't really practice what I preach here. I'm not quite as clean of an eater as I probably should be going into the diet. One of the best things we see people do to prep for the diet or to avoid the headache is prep for the diet. Eat fairly cleanly the 2 weeks prior, whole plant food, plant-based nutrition, get plenty of fluids, electrolytes. I think one of the biggest things we see causing the problems on the diet is dehydration, because it's an 800 calorie diet with about around 1.5 to 1.7 grams of sodium per day. And most Americans eat closer to 3 to 6 grams. So they're going to get dehydrated pretty quickly. A lot of people will notice that they're urinating quite a bit early on in the diet, which is very common for any ketogenic diet to begin with, but especially on our diet. So staying thoroughly hydrated and maybe even supplementing with sodium, potassium, and magnesium early on through adding Himalayan sea salt to the soups or taking some sort of clean 0-calorie supplement might not be a bad idea to help them maintain that blood volume, which can help ease some of the symptoms of the headaches. Sometimes it's just your brain punishing you because of the presence of ketones, the lack of sugar. There's not a whole lot we can do there, but we do see people who do more electrolyte supplementation and drink plenty of fluids avoid the headaches more frequently. Another thing you can do, if you're a caffeine drinker, wean your caffeine down ahead of time. We recommend that people don't have more than 90 milligrams of caffeine any day on the diet, because caffeine can mildly reactivate one of the pathways we're trying to suppress. So it's really important to keep your caffeine intake low. But if you drop from 2 cups of coffee a day to 0, you're going to get a bad headache on day 2 as well. So there's a lot of things that can make that headache worse. So if you are a caffeine drinker, have your cup of coffee on day 1, 2, and 3 of the diet, but try not to do more than that. Definitely don't add sugar or cream. But yeah, so caffeine, hydration, and electrolytes are the 3 main things we say to help avoid those headaches.
I love it. I love it because my patients want their organic, and it should be organic coffee. And I love the idea of electrolytes. I don't want to get too technical. I know you know what I'm saying. Something called natriuresis. So basically what happens is, because you go less food and less carbohydrates, because we're a little calorically restrictive, all the water comes out. They call that a swoosh. And when the water comes out, you lose the electrolytes. And that's natriuresis. And that's why you want to put the Himalayan salt in. Great call. Always hydrate. That's outstanding. So I do want to say that very few people do feel the headache that we're talking about. They don't get the keto flu like so many people get when they do the ketogenic diet, which I was really happy about. So I wanted to clear that up. But some people ask a lot of questions about that. In addition, how often should people fast, and how often should people do the kits or the FMD?
And that's a good question too. We did, our clinical trial was based on 3 cycles, meaning 5 days, once a month for 3 months in a row. So a total of 15 days or 3 5-day cycles. And it's sort of like working out. If you just do 1 cycle, you're going to get some benefit, but it's probably not going to last that very long. It's like going to the gym once. So you've really got to go a couple times to get into shape. And once you get in shape, then you can back it down a little bit. But for our clinical trial, we saw the best results for people who did 3 cycles over the course of 3 months. And whether that's water fasting or fasting mimicking diet, I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. I just want people to get as healthy as they can. So the main thing that we looked at in our clinical trial was those 3 cycles. We don't have data beyond that. But most of the anecdotal evidence we see is that once you've done those 3, if you're where you want to be metabolically and everything looks the way you want it to look, you can probably drop it to once every 3 to 6 months, just reminding your body with 5 days of fasting mimicking diet. How often you should regularly water fast, we don't really know. Dr. Longo himself practices a 12-12 where he eats breakfast and dinner. To my knowledge, he may have changed that in the last couple of months, but so that his body is regularly cycling from a glucose state to a glucose starved state every day, twice a day. So that seems to be, a lot of evidence points to that probably being the optimal, but again, we're always learning new things. And one of the nice things about this company, and one of the reasons I left the Cleveland Clinic to come work here, is that I really, really believe in the science. So as the science shows us more, we change our opinions, we modify them, we adapt it accordingly. So far, we haven't had to. It looks like Dr. Longo did all of his research right the first time, but how often you should fast is something I do think we'll know more about. And there are a lot of people doing a lot of research on that exact subject right now.
So the best way to do it, and that's what I was told, and that's what I've implemented in my office, is 5 days for every 5 days for every month for a 3-month period. And then possibly every other month if somebody still has a lot more health to gather. In addition, otherwise sort of a maintenance, somebody a little trimmer, a little healthier, every 3 to 6 months. Now you said the 3 pathways, and the mTOR, IGF, and
PKA,
right.
Protein kinase A,
Quickly, could you tell us what each pathway is when they're stimulated, and why we don't exercise intensely on the FMD?
Yeah, sure. So IGF-1 is insulin-like growth factor 1, and it's kind of the main gate for growth hormone and growth-related aging. And it's primarily triggered by protein. This is why you see bodybuilders pound protein. They want to up their growth hormone and IGF-1 pathways to stimulate growth in the body to carry more muscle. So in addition to working out, which stimulates IGF-1, eating heavy amounts of protein also stimulates IGF-1. And if you do them together, that's when you gain peak muscle mass in a lot of these bodybuilding studies. So that's why they do it. But again, that's just triggering rapid aging. So we're temporarily trying to stop that mechanism. So drop protein really, really low, which is what Prolon has, very, very low protein for those 5 days. And that shuts down IGF-1 low enough to trigger cleanup. There are 2 other pathways that can block that cleanup, one of which is mTOR, or mechanistic target of rapamycin, which does also, this is sort of a feedback loop. The body is very complex, so I'm giving a simplified version, but IGF-1 and mTOR work together. But mTOR is also triggered by sugar and carbs. So that's one of the reasons why there's very little sugar in Prolon and only a moderate amount of carbs. And again, plant-based sugar, carbs, and protein trigger these mechanisms much less than animal-based sources. So animal protein is the strongest inducer of IGF-1. Plant-based protein is less strong. So that's why there's some plant-based protein in Prolon, and we can get away with it, but there's no animal product in the diet. There are, at the moment, the gel capsules still have bovine extract, but we're engineering that out as soon as we get approval from all of the various international foreign governments that we work with. It's been a nightmare, but eventually the product will be 100% vegan. But the only thing right now that has any animal product at all is that gel cap for the algal oil, omega-3s. And then the third pathway is protein kinase A, which is also somewhat related to protein, to carbs and sugar. It's less important, but it's still very much active. There are a couple other pathways that are involved too, but we kind of don't have to worry about all that science because we just picked the right ratio that everything gets quieted down. So these are the 3 we talk about, but there are other ones involved too. But why we don't exercise on the diet, part of it is what we just mentioned. Exercise can trigger IGF-1, which is sort of counteracting what we're trying to do. We're trying to shut down everything so that the body turns on that cleanup. Anything you do that ramps up that growth is going to turn off that cleanup. Exercise has 3 problems with it when you're in a fasting state. Some people may be able to exercise, but we don't think it's particularly necessary. Because we've turned off IGF-1, you're not going to get much benefit to working out. You're not going to build too much new muscle. So all you're going to be doing is using up calories you already don't have because you're not taking in many on the diet. And if you use up calories, the body may go looking for them and it may find them in your muscle. So paradoxically, if you work out, you may actually lose muscle mass. Now, we haven't seen that in studies, but the math checks out. The other problem is that anytime you use up calories, you're going to become more lightheaded and potentially increase your risk of injury on the diet. So there's 3 reasons why we don't really encourage people to work out, especially not on day 2 and 3 when you're really transitioning into it. But in general, we say, don't work out. You don't have to on the diet. You can briskly walk. You can do gentle yoga. Just don't do anything vigorous for more than 15 minutes a day. And when I say vigorous, I mean 65% of your max heart rate. So if you're vigorously sweating, it's probably not a great thing on the diet.
So the steps are fine. You can keep your steps up. Don't lift the weight and don't push yourself. That's not the time to see what your deadlift is. I got it. That's great. What should you eat when you're not fasting? That's one of the big questions. You know what? I'm going to reel that one in. I'm going to ask you another question. Are you comfortable with talking about the caloric intake? I know you mentioned 800 calories. I think that's days 2
Sure.
to 5. And
Yeah.
can you break down the ratios in a percentage? And then I'd like
Yeah.
to talk about the drink a little bit, because again, the drink is
Sure.
a secret sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the diet is composed of 1,130 calories on day 1, and that's a transition day to kind of ease your body into the fasting state. And then day 2 through 5 are about 800 calories, or a little less. And the ratio is, again, very low protein, about 10% protein, very high healthy fat, about 50%, moderate carbs, about 35%, and then about 5% sugar. And again, as a clinician, I don't have any issue with anybody trying to do this on their own. I will caution everybody, it's extremely challenging to get everything right. It matters which carbs, which protein. We also include almost a full day of fiber, despite having less than half the calories of a full day's recommended daily allowance. So we do a lot to minimize glycemic index. So even if you're getting the ratio right, you're probably not getting into a fasting state. All the recipes I've seen online, just about all of them, are incorrect to get into a fasting mimicking diet. It's very challenging to mimic this, and I don't get paid on sales, so this is not for trying to keep the company afloat. I really encourage everybody. We did the thinking for you. I think we got it right. We made it fairly enjoyable. So I really encourage people to just try it our way. Again, I'm open to people trying it on their own. I just haven't seen a lot of people be successful. So that being said, Dr. Longo publishes the ratio in his own book. So he gives away the sauce. So that's another cool thing to work for a gentleman who's created such a wondrous thing and donated all of his shares to charity. So he is not going to see a dime from the profit of Prolong. So all of the money that he would ever make in stock is going to research for nutrition as a treatment for disease. So sorry, that's my little plug for Dr. Longo.
No doubt. I mean, that's legit. They've all talked about that. You speak the truth. So it's 1,100 calories on day 1, 800 on day 2 through 5, and those are the ratios. And the ratios are similar throughout the days.
Yeah, we change up what items, and each item is not that ratio. But if you add them all together, they hit that ratio.
Right. Great. And the l-nutra drink was the one with the glycerin in it, which helped avoid the loss of lean body tissue, or lean body mass, as you so eloquently put it. So people are going to ask, when they're not fasting, can they eat pizza? Or basically, what can they eat when they're not fasting?
Well, and that's also a great question. What we think right now, based on all of the research around the longest living people on earth, the so-called blue zones, is that it sure seems like a Mediterranean style diet that's low in animal protein is probably optimal for maximizing longevity. Depending on what your goals are, that may not get you there. It's really hard to maintain a significant amount of muscle mass at the very low calorie Mediterranean diet, which is, I think Dr. Longo actually recommends a 60-30-10, where 60% of the diet is plant-based carbohydrates, 30% is fat, and 10% is protein. And that's a very low amount of protein. So most people are not going to be able to carry much muscle mass there beyond what's needed for daily activities. You don't see a whole lot of bodybuilders in Okinawa, Japan, or Sardinia, Italy, but they're also not getting cancer at the same rate we are, and living much longer. So a lot of the evidence points towards a plant-based, much lower calorie than what Americans consume, but still enough to maintain all your body functions at a fairly low protein amount. So if you're going to eat any animal at all, you eat shellfish or seafood that's low in mercury, and then you eat a lot of healthy nuts, olives, avocados, legumes, things like that. So very much, and I think he talks about that in Walter Longo talks about it in his longevity diet book, what he recommends people eating and why. And he goes through the math, and it's a pretty compelling A to B to C, but not everybody listens on that one. So we're still building the groundwork and trying to validate it, but evidence from history shows that it's probably the best idea.
Now, a couple of quick things that I've noticed using it in the office. I've seen some great brain cognitive improvements. People said they're much clearer. A lot of lab tests implying that it's been positive in my office, again, for gut health. I'm a big proponent of that. So the way I do it, and we've talked about it, so we'll expand a little bit, is I'll do the 5 days and I'll do of the FMD, and then I'll do 25 to 30 days of a gut restoration program right after that, because now they're in a mode, they're in a health building mode, and then I'll come back with the 5 days, do something else for the 30, and month number 3, again, replicate that. So we do things like that, just so everybody can understand. The docs who are listening, understand that the game's not over. Now's your time. Really, the patient's extremely happy in that day 6. I think the only thing we didn't cover, it's called a refeeding stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so day 6 is, now again, we didn't do a whole lot of studies on this in our published clinical trial, so it's a little difficult to definitively say what you should be eating on day 6, but we do know that number 1, gut rest is sort of important. You've been more or less eating a soft diet for the last 5 days. So if you put something heavy and protein in there, like if you eat a steak or a burger, you're going to have a lot of trouble and you won't feel very good. So part of it is just mechanical. The gut has been resting. Another part is that you probably have changed your microbiome. So if we put in a lot of stuff that you weren't eating for the last 5 days, you're going to struggle. You're going to have some gut pain. You may have some changes in bowel habits. So the easiest thing we recommend is just go slow, transition from liquids to softs to solids, avoid heavy sugar. If you eat a donut, most people tend to get pretty sick. I love what you're doing. We don't have a whole lot of data on that in our clinical trials. And again, we're very data driven. So I can't advise people to do something that we don't have data to support, but it makes a lot of sense to do exactly what you described. But on the transition day, we do recommend people go slow, start with juices or something liquid in consistency, and then maybe move their way up. So.
How interesting is that we put someone on a healthy diet for 5 days and then we offer them something unhealthy, like you mentioned, and all of a sudden they realize how bad it is. And I always tell people, when you're in a dump, and you're eating crap, it doesn't affect you as much as you think. But after you've eaten healthy and you give them like that donut or that French fry, you say, wait a minute, this is awful. It tastes terrible. It's upsetting my stomach. What's going on? I always say that most people wear glasses. You don't know what you're missing in your health till you put your health glasses on. So now that I have them on after a month of FMD and proper fasting or 5 days within month 1, it's a total dynamic change. That's why I just try and get them on. So, we've covered a lot of really good stuff in a great period of time. How can they get in touch with you? How can they learn more about FMD, fasting, and all that?
Yeah, so there's 2 places you can go. The main one, if you want to try Prolon for general wellness purposes, is prolonfmd.com, which is PROLONFMD.com. Prolon is prolonging without the G. It's prolonging longevity is what it stands for. So that's where you can learn more about the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. The company itself is called l-nutra, Longevity Nutrition. It's l-nutra, N as in Nancy, UTRA.com. And that'll give you a little bit of background on what we're doing as a company, because we are doing, at the moment, there's about 39 clinical trials in some stage of beginning or completion. We're doing a lot trying to use nutrition and fasting mimicking diets for other purposes. Now, again, there's a lot of limits on what we can say. We don't have a lot of published stuff yet, but if you want to see where we're headed, that's a good place to go. I know we do various promotions throughout the year. Another thing I will encourage everybody to do is that it is a lot of people seem to think the box is fairly expensive. I highlight to everybody that you've got 5 days where you're not eating or drinking anything else. So I think that it averages out. Plus, most food doesn't give you the kind of benefits that this will. So, and obviously, one other caveat: if you have a medical condition, I encourage you to discuss this with your doctor. We do not recommend that anybody do this diet without medical supervision if they're on any medication or have any significant medical disease. So that's one little caveat I would also mention. So definitely go through your healthcare provider, somebody who knows what they're doing. We have resources for you too. You can contact us, call us. You may even get me. I'm one of the medical science liaisons. We have 2 doctors on staff. We have a wonderful nutritionist. We actually have 2 other doctors on staff that work in medical affairs as well. So we got a lot of people and a lot of resources here to help people out, help educate you on how to do this. But we really think we're on to something, and it sounds like you've had some good successes with it. So hopefully you agree with us.
Without question, you're on to something. You've been great. We've talked on and off camera. I really appreciate it. We're going to get you back on. Dr. James Kelley, Dr. Rob Silverman, Proven Health Alternatives. Dr. Rob, always yours in health.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.